As a wildlife biologist, I've seen some strange things out on the Arctic ice, but nothing could have prepared me for this. We were out tagging polar bears when we spotted one with a collar from the 1800s. The wind out here is a constant, brutal force. It howls and bites, turning your breath to ice crystals the moment it leaves your lips. For years, this has been my office. The vast, unending expanse of white. My name is Dr. Eerie Thorne, and I lead a small team of researchers dedicated to studying polar bears, tracking their movements, and trying to understand how they're adapting to a rapidly changing world. Our work is crucial, but it's also isolating. Days blur into weeks, and the only company you have is your team and the silent, powerful predators we study. The day it all changed started like any other. The hum of the helicopter was a familiar sound against the vast silence. We'd spotted a lone male, a magnificent specimen, his fur a creamy white against the snow. From the air we tranquilized him. It's a delicate process, one that always fills me with a mix of adrenaline and reverence. You have to get the dosage just right enough to sedate him, but not so much as to cause harm. Once he was down, we landed a safe distance away and approached on foot. He was massive, easily over 1,000 pounds. His chest rose and fell in slow, rhythmic breaths. My team, Liam and Jenna, got to work immediately. Liam, our vet, began checking the bear's vitals, while Jenna prepared the modern GPS collar and took measurements. My job was to do a general health check and take samples. That's when I saw it. Around the bear's thick neck, partially hidden beneath his fur and layers of older scarred skin, was another collar. It wasn't one of ours. It was old, made of thick, weathered leather and dark, tarnished brass. My heart skipped a beat. This was impossible. The leather was cracked and stiff, and the brass buckle was green with age. Etched into the brass plate, barely legible, were a few words. I brushed away the snow and frost with my gloved hand, leaning in closer to read the inscription, HMS Terror. The name sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. The HMS Terror. It was one of the 2 ships from the Franklin expedition, which vanished in the Arctic in the mid-1840s while searching for the Northwest Passage. The entire crew, 129 men, lost to the ice. I called Liam and Jenna over. Their chatter died as they saw the look on my face, then the collar itself. We stood there in stunned silence, the only sound, the wind and the slow breathing of the sedated bear. "That can't be real," Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible. Liam ran a hand over the ancient leather. "The craftsmanship, this is antique, pre-20th century. For sure." My mind raced. How could a polar bear be wearing a collar from a ship that disappeared over 170 years ago? Polar bears live for 25, maybe 30 years in the wild. This defied all logic, all biology. We documented everything meticulously, taking photos of the collar from every angle. I knew no one would believe us without proof. Beneath the nameplate was a smaller inscription. A serial number specimen 001. Was this some kind of sick joke? A historical reenactment prop, but the wear, the age, the way the bear's skin had grown around it. It was authentic. It had been on this bear for a very, very long time. We decided to leave the old collar on. Removing it felt wrong, like disturbing a sacred artifact. We fitted our modern GPS tracker alongside it and finished our work as the sedative began to wear off. From the safety of the helicopter, we watched the bear, now a walking paradox, stir and eventually lumber away across the ice, carrying his impossible secret with him. Back at the research station, the atmosphere was thick with a tension I'd never experienced. We huddled around my laptop, pulling up everything we could find on the Franklin expedition. The story was grim. The ships became trapped in the ice, and the crew abandoned them, trying to walk to safety. None of them made it. Reports from Inuit hunters at the time spoke of desperate men, starving and succumbing to the elements, but the collar, specimen 007, implied a scientific purpose. Was it possible that the crew of the HMS Terror had been conducting their own biological studies? It seemed plausible. Victorian England was a hotbed of scientific exploration. Maybe they had captured and collared a bear, but that didn't explain how the collar was on this bear. Today, the GPS data started coming in. For the first week, the bear, whom we'd now nicknamed Terror, behaved like any other polar bear. He roamed, he hunted seals, he followed the sea ice. But then, his movements became strange. He began heading north, far north, deeper into the permanent ice cap than any bear we had ever tracked. He was moving with a relentless purpose, into a region where food was scarce and the conditions were exponentially harsher. Liam theorized he was sick, disoriented. Jenna thought maybe our tranquilizer had had some unforeseen neurological effect. I wasn't so sure. His path was too direct, too unwavering. It was as if he was being called somewhere. Days turned into weeks. We watched our screens, obsessed. Terror kept moving north, into the polar night, a region of perpetual darkness at this time of year. The signal became intermittent. The temperatures were dropping to levels that tested the limits of our equipment. We were on the verge of losing him. Then, one night, the signal stabilized. It stopped moving. The GPS coordinates placed him in a vast, featureless expanse of ancient sea ice, an ice desert. There was nothing there. No geological features, no known hunting grounds. It just stopped. "He's dead," Liam said quietly, staring at the static dot on the map. He finally succumbed, but the transmitter was still sending a signal. Its internal sensors indicated that the collar was still at a relatively stable temperature, not the ambient minus 50 degrees Celsius it should have been if it were lying on the ice. It was as if the bear was sheltered. We had to know. After a tense debate, we secured funding and permission for a flyover. It was risky, pushing the helicopter and ourselves to our operational limits, but the mystery was too great to ignore. As we flew north, the world below became even more alien. The sun was a permanent smudge on the horizon. The ice was older here, thicker, buckled into strange formations by millennia of pressure. Our GPS led us to the exact coordinates. We circled, peering down into the blue-gray twilight. At first, we saw nothing, just ice. Then, Jenna shouted, pointing. "There, look." I followed her gaze. It was almost invisible, a dark shape perfectly camouflaged against the ice and shadow. As we descended, the shape resolved itself. It was the stern of a wooden ship, locked in the ice, its timbers black with age. The masts were gone, snapped off long ago, but the hull was eerily intact. My blood ran cold. On the transom, faintly visible, were the letters, HMS Terror. We had found it, the lost ship, frozen in a tomb of ice hundreds of miles from where it was last seen. But that wasn't the most shocking part. There were tracks in the snow leading from the ship, polar bear tracks, terrorist tracks, and the GPS signal was coming from inside the ship. Against all safety protocols and my own better judgment, we landed. The silence was absolute. We were the only living humans for 1,000 miles. Armed with a flare gun and a heavy-duty flashlight, I led the way, my heart hammering against my ribs. We found a breach in the hull where the ice had crushed the timbers, creating a makeshift entrance. The tracks led right inside. I squeezed through the opening, my light cutting a nervous beam through the darkness. The air inside was frigid and still, thick with the smell of old wood and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet. The beam of my flashlight fell upon a scene straight out of a nightmare. We were in the ship's lower deck. Scattered about were the frozen remains of the crew, preserved in the cold like macabre statues. Some were in their bunks, others slumped over tables. It was a ghost ship, a floating mausoleum, and in the center of the cramped space stood our bear Terror. He was standing over what looked like a makeshift operating table. On the table lay another polar bear, this one smaller. It was still, and around its neck was another leather and brass collar. Terror turned to face us. He wasn't aggressive. He just watched us with an intelligence that felt ancient and profound. His eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. My light swept past him and I saw what he was doing. Arranged on a nearby crate were tools, not modern tools. They were 19th century surgical instruments, scalpels, clamps, saws, all laid out neatly. And then I saw the journals, stacked on a sea chest bound in leather. I picked one up. The ink was faded, the handwriting spidery. It was the ship's surgeon's log. My hands shaking, I flipped through the pages. The entries started with typical accounts of crew health, but they grew more frantic as the ship became trapped. Then they took a bizarre turn. The surgeon, a Dr. Alistair Finch, wrote about their last desperate attempt at survival. Not a trek south, but a radical experiment. They believed they were on the cusp of a great discovery, a way to transfer consciousness, a way to escape their dying human bodies and live on in a form better suited to this brutal land. The polar bear. They had captured and studied them. Specimen 001 was their first success. The surgeon had somehow, impossibly, transferred his own consciousness into the bear. The journal entries detailed the process, a chilling blend of surgical procedure and what sounded like arcane ritual. He wrote of the initial disorientation, the merging of human intellect and animal instinct. He had become the bear. The final entry was chilling. The crew is gone. I am all that remains. But I am not alone. I have my work. The great work must continue. I will endure. We will endure. I looked from the journal to the bear, to Terror, to Dr. Alistair Finch. He was not just a bear. He was the last survivor of the Franklin expedition. For over 170 years, he had been living on the ice, driven by his human intellect to continue his work. He wasn't just surviving, he was propagating. He was finding other bears and transferring the minds of his long-dead crewmates, creating more like himself. The still bear on the table. Was it his next subject? Was this his lab? Terror took a step towards me. He made a low sound, a rumble in his chest that wasn't a growl. It was complex, almost like a word trying to form. A survival instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, mesmerized by the sheer impossibility of it all. This creature held the answer to one of history's greatest mysteries, and the key to a science we couldn't even begin to comprehend. I slowly backed away, out of the ship, never taking my eyes off him. Liam and Jenna were right behind me. We got back to the helicopter, our minds completely shattered. We flew away, leaving the ghost ship and its eternal surgeon to the silence of the ice. We never filed a full report. Who would believe us? We erased the GPS data, we buried the story, but I can't forget. Every night I see those intelligent eyes in my dreams. I think about Dr. Finch, the man inside the bear. continuing his great work in the loneliest, coldest place on Earth. Sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I think I can hear it, a sound that is both the roar of a bear and the ghost of a human voice, whispering from the ice. What we discovered out there has changed me forever. It makes you wonder what other secrets the vast empty places of our world are keeping. Thank you so much for watching. This story is a testament to the unknown, and it's a chilling reminder that there are some things that science may never be able to explain. If you were captivated by this mystery, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next descent into the unknown. What do you think was happening on that ship? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Stay curious, and stay safe.